In sports, athletes push their bodies to extraordinary limits. But behind the glory and adrenaline lie stories that never make the highlight reels. In this video, we're uncovering 6 of the most disturbing sports accidents ever recorded. It was March 26, 2017, in Bristol, England. The morning air was heavy with drizzle, the pitch already slick before kickoff. To the players, it was just another university-friendly, meant to sharpen form before finals week. But as the clouds hung low over Coombe Dingle Sports Complex, the uneven field would soon expose the thin line between pain management and fatal oversight. Connor Hale, 21, was a third-year biology major at the University of Bristol. He'd built a name on the club's rugby team as a fearless inside center, known for clean, hard hits that drew attention from regional scouts. Off the field, he was methodical, a student who studied anatomy late into the night, fascinated by how the body breaks and repairs. He played through injuries more than he admitted, often strapping his ribs with tape rather than reporting pain. Sitting out meant losing his starting spot, and with one last season left, he couldn't risk it. To keep up appearances, he'd skipped medical follow-ups for a bruised rib sustained 3 weeks earlier. Rugby at the university level required no mandatory rib padding, and while some players wore compression gear with protective panels, Connor dismissed it as restrictive. His coach trusted him to know his limits, though unbeknownst to them, the earlier injury had likely caused a small subcapsular hematoma in his spleen, a slow, contained bleed that left the organ fragile beneath his lower ribs. The Cardiff match was meant to be routine, a test for lineup rotations before intercollegiate finals. The rain had worsened since morning, turning the grass into a thin layer of mud that made footing unpredictable. Players slipped frequently, and tackles hit with more momentum than control. In the second half, Cardiff's inside center, a heavier, stockier player, charged downfield. Connor lunged high to stop him. His left shoulder caught the opponent's raised knee mid-stride, the collision audible even from the sideline. He hit the ground, gasped, then stood. He waved off the trainer. The crowd clapped, assuming it was routine. Footage from the sideline shows him moving slower afterward. Between plays, he pressed his forearm against his ribs, pausing longer than usual before realigning in defense. 2 minutes later, he staggered again. Teammates said he looked disoriented but still tried to follow the ball. Then, during a turnover, he stopped entirely, clutching his left side before collapsing face first near midfield. Players froze. The referee halted the match immediately. The trainer sprinted across the field. Hale was unresponsive, breathing shallowly. Medics recorded a rapid pulse and plummeting blood pressure, clear signs of internal hemorrhage. What appeared to be a cracked rib was later confirmed as a ruptured spleen, the earlier impact having torn tissue weakened by prior bruising. Internal bleeding had begun almost immediately, worsening with every movement after the tackle. On-site medics performed chest compressions for 8 minutes before loading him into the ambulance. He went into cardiac arrest en route and was pronounced dead at Southmead Hospital less than an hour later. The university released a brief statement citing medical review protocols and suspended all spring fixtures pending investigation. No disciplinary findings were made. The incident was ruled an accidental sports injury. Hale's parents declined offers for a memorial match. His number was quietly retired from the club roster, and the local sponsor withdrew from collegiate rugby that summer. It was January 20th, 2018, in Dallas, Texas. The air inside the Lone Star Elite Gym was dry and heavy with the smell of rubber mats and sweat. The team's final Saturday practice before nationals was supposed to be brief, just a timing review. But by night's end, the building would fall silent in a way it never had before. Madison Clark, 16, was one of the youngest flyers on the Lone Star Elite cheer squad. She'd earned her place early, moving up from junior level after coaches noticed her balance and fearlessness. At 5 feet 2 inches and barely over 100 pounds, she was light but strong, known for committing to new stunts before others dared to try. Off the mat, she was meticulous. Color-coded notebooks, foam rollers lined by height, chalk marks for spacing. The team trained 6 days a week under the Texas Cheer Athletics circuit, with sponsorships from small athletic brands that expected podium finishes. Madison wanted a college cheer scholarship and knew high-difficulty routines got attention. The gym's spring floor was designed to absorb shock, but still felt firm under landings. Flyers were expected to rely entirely on their base's grip and timing. One hesitation could collapse a formation. Madison had learned to trust that system, repetition as safety, precision as confidence. That evening, the team gathered for a closed practice. A few members were out sick, including 2 base lifters from Madison's primary stunt group. The coach decided to run a timing-only drill for the new pyramid variation that would headline their nationals routine. Madison's release twist from the top would be the visual peak, a 540-degree spin before regrasp. The stunt was designed for full-height execution later in the season, but during spacing tests, it reached roughly 12 feet off the floor. The coach allowed it, with spotters moved closer, but still 2 steps back for visibility. The session stretched past 9 p.m. The team had already repeated the sequence 7 times. Fatigue was obvious. Shoulders slumped, timing slightly delayed on the catches. Madison brushed chalk dust from her hands and adjusted her wrist wraps. She hesitated once, glancing at her coach, who gave a nod to continue. The song cue started again. She climbed the base formation, feet finding shoulders, hands gripping wrists. On count 5, she rose to full height, arms locked. On 6, she initiated the twist. Video analysis later showed what happened next. As she began the rotation, her left foot caught the shoulder of the mid-base, disrupting her spin axis. The contact forced her body sideways, throwing off the planned rotation. Witnesses said her torso turned at an unnatural angle mid-air, one arm flailing as she tried to correct. Her head snapped downward, and instead of descending flat, she fell diagonally from nearly 14 feet. The bases reached up too late. Madison struck the mat on her right temple, the sound sharp and hollow in the open gym. She didn't move. Teammates froze, then screamed. One ran to the front desk to call 911 while another held her hand, noticing the brief tremor in her fingers that faded within seconds. The coach checked her pulse, but found it erratic. Paramedics arrived within 4 minutes and provided assisted ventilation while stabilizing her cervical spine. She was taken to Baylor University Medical Center, where CT scans revealed a severe subdural hematoma with brainstem compression. She never regained consciousness and was pronounced dead just after midnight. The gym shut down for a week. Investigators found no equipment failure and confirmed that mats met regulation depth. The report cited loss of rotational control during elevated stunt release as the cause. In later reviews, coaches admitted fatigue and reduced base staffing may have increased risk. In the weeks that followed, the gym stayed unnervingly quiet. Music was played at half volume, and the speaker above Madison's side of the floor was kept unplugged. Her uniform hung untouched in a locker marked with her initials. When competition season resumed, the team's new formation left a space in the center where she used to stand. It was February 3, 2015, in Duluth, Minnesota. The community ice rink was unusually quiet that Tuesday night, the chill from the compressors clinging to the air in pale mist. Parents sat scattered along the bleachers, gloves folded, coffee steaming, watching the local high school league's late match drag into its final minutes. Ryan Halverson, 17, was a senior defenseman from East Duluth High. Off the ice, he was reserved, known for his steady temperament and part-time job at a hardware store. On the ice, he was the opposite, physical, relentless, often the first to check and the last to leave a corner fight. He'd been skating since he was 5, training through weekend clinics and scrimmages organized by the Minnesota Youth Hockey Association. Though talented, he'd never been scouted for higher leagues. His plan was to study mechanical engineering after graduation. Hockey culture in northern Minnesota prized toughness. Even in community league games outside Minnesota sanction, few players wore neck guards, seen as restrictive or unnecessary outside sanctioned tournaments. The rink's semi-contact format blurred the line between safety and intensity. Ryan's gear was standard: a Bauer cage helmet, chest protector, gloves, and shin pads. His jersey hung loose, the back soaked from sweat and condensation. The ice itself was uneven from hours of play, small ruts forming near the goalposts where players had cut hard stops all night. Under those conditions, Footing became unpredictable, especially late in a game when exhaustion set in. That night's match was tied 2-2, entering the third period. Both teams were pressing, tempers short, blades scraping louder with each rush. The final minutes saw a series of aggressive scrambles near the crease as players crowded the goalie. Ryan's last shift began with a defensive zone face-off. The puck deflected off a teammate's stick and slid toward their own net. He lunged to block it, skidding forward just as two opposing forwards charged in. What followed unfolded in seconds. One player tripped over Ryan's left skate, toppling backward. Another, spinning to avoid the collision, lost balance and fell in from the side. The three bodies tangled at the base of the goalpost, the puck vanishing beneath them. The goalie dropped his stick and lunged forward to cover, his own pads catching the edge of the pile. It looked, at first, like a routine crash. Witnesses later said they saw Ryan push himself up, glove pressed to his neck. A red mist spread faintly against the white ice. A skate blade, believed to be from the falling forward, had sliced through the exposed area between helmet and chest guard. He stood halfway, stumbled, and went down again. The referee and goalie reached him first, using a towel and gloves to apply pressure. Players from both teams froze, motionless, except for one skater who waved urgently toward the bench. The bleeding was too rapid. The cut had severed the carotid artery. Emergency responders arrived within 4 minutes. They carried him off through the maintenance tunnel. The crowd was ushered out in silence while the Zamboni crew scraped the area, refilling with hot water that steamed into the cold air. At the hospital, he was pronounced dead less than 20 minutes after the impact. The rink shut down for a week. Officials installed a rule requiring neck guards for all under 18 leagues. Ryan's funeral took place 3 days later at St. Luke's Lutheran Church, a few blocks from his school. The hockey team arrived in full uniform, skates slung over their shoulders, filling 2 front pews beside the coaches. His parents sat nearest the casket, a folded jersey placed over the lid. It was July 9th, 2016, on the outskirts of Reno, Nevada. The Lemon Valley track baked under the desert heat. Spectators shaded their eyes with gloved hands, waiting for the freestyle portion of the meet to begin. The wind carried the faint hum of engines idling, mixed with the smell of oil and scorched dirt. Tyler Brennan, 24, was known around the local motocross circuit as a mechanic who could outride half the professionals he tuned for. He worked weekdays in a small garage south of Sparks, saving money to build his own bike, a modified 250 cubic centimeter frame reinforced for stunts. Friends said his obsession wasn't fame, but control. He'd been rebuilding engines since high school, chasing the idea of a machine that could move exactly as he imagined. Sponsors never came calling, but he didn't mind. His motivation came from proving he could hang with riders who had backing and custom parts he could only dream of affording. Motocross in the desert demanded precision. Tracks like Lemon Valley had hard-packed soil that punished overcorrection. Landing angles were everything. Even a few degrees off could send the rear tire bucking. Tyler's custom bike was heavier than stock, its altered suspension giving him extra lift, but making rotation harder to time. The backflip, a showy but high-risk move, was something he practiced on foam pits and dunes. But dirt jumps were different. The bike's weight could pull forward mid-air if the speed was misjudged. That afternoon, the event's organizers were pushing to finish before temperatures climbed further. Conditions were still within competition limits, though wind readings hovered near the cutoff. Tyler lined up his run anyway. He'd landed the same backflip only twice before, once during an exhibition in Carson City and once on a private practice jump. The jump was about 70 feet from ramp to landing. On his first 2 warm-up passes, he came up short, adjusting throttle and approach angle. The third time, he gunned it harder, engine screaming as he launched. His rotation was too aggressive from the start. At the apex, the bike was nearly vertical, rear tire pointing skyward. Spectators' footage showed the instant imbalance. Too much torque, not enough clearance. The rear wheel struck the ground first, compressing violently. The impact pitched him forward over the handlebars, his helmeted head snapping back as he hit the dirt chest first. The sound was dull, mechanical, followed by the revving of the still-running engine. The motorcycle bounced once, then toppled onto him, the rear tire spinning in the air. Officials and medics sprinted across the track. When they rolled the bike off, Tyler wasn't breathing. His pulse never returned despite repeated compressions. It was later determined the break, an atlantoaxial dislocation at the upper cervical spine, had been instant. Spectators were ushered back while paramedics draped a tarp over the scene. The announcer's voice faltered before the speakers went silent. By sunset, the track was empty except for tire ruts and the faint oil stain where his bike had come to rest. When the coroner's report came out, the term instantaneous became its quiet reassurance. No charges were filed, no equipment blamed. His closest friend sold his bike soon after and began showing up only with a pickup, helping others fix theirs while the jumps stayed untouched longer than usual. It was September 18th, 2015, in Jaipur, India. The morning sun was already harsh over the red dirt athletics field, where banners for the intercollegiate meet hung motionless in the still air. Near the edge of the field stood the pole vault pit, an improvised setup that looked out of place amid the running lanes. Ravi Kumar, 20, was a second-year physical education student at a small government sports college. Though known more for sprinting and cricket, he had volunteered to demonstrate pole vaulting after a senior failed to show. He had no formal training in the event, but was determined to prove his versatility to his instructors, who often dismissed him as undisciplined. The college had no sponsor affiliation and limited funding. Its facilities dated back decades, patched together by faculty and students. Ravi's motivation was simple: visibility. He wanted a nod from the visiting coaches that might help him earn a transfer to a better-funded institution in Delhi. Pole vaulting at the college level was rare in Rajasthan due to cost and risk. The setup used that day was rudimentary: a metal box embedded in the ground, 2 upright poles for the crossbar, and a sand pit instead of foam mats for landing. The fiberglass poles were shared equipment, weathered by years of outdoor exposure. The one Ravi selected had visible scuffing near the base and a faint white line in the resin that should have ruled it out for use. The schedule had run late due to an earlier delay, and by the time pole vault began, the temperature had climbed to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. A visiting coach from another college advised postponing the demonstration because the sandpit's surface had hardened. Ravi shook off the warning, insisting he'd only make one clean jump for the spectators. His teammates looked uneasy as he chalked his hands and tested the pole's flex. The first 2 warm-up attempts were clumsy. The pole bent too deeply, nearly springing him backward. After the second failure, a staff member noticed the base sleeve beginning to split. Ravi still pressed for one final attempt. He sprinted down the narrow dirt runway, the pole wavering slightly under tension. As he planted the base into the metal box and began to rise, a sharp crack split the air. The fiberglass pole snapped lengthwise under load. Instead of letting go, Ravi's reflexes made him hold on. The upper section whipped upward and then downward in an arc, the splintered end driving into the left side of his chest just below the collarbone. Witnesses saw his body jolt mid-air before he dropped to his knees, both hands clamping instinctively over the wound. The impact caused deep penetration and internal bleeding. The jagged shaft had punctured his lung and major vessels near the heart. Students screamed for help, but most froze at the sight. The event's lone medic ran from the track tent, arriving within seconds. But the bleeding was already profuse. He was placed on a stretcher improvised from a wooden hurdle and carried toward the gate, while another student called the ambulance from a borrowed phone since the medic's radio wasn't working. By the time the vehicle reached him, 11 minutes later, his pulse was gone. The pole fragment was only removed at the hospital during the post-mortem. The athletics meet ended in silence that afternoon. Officials canceled the remaining events and quietly collected the equipment. His name was omitted from the results sheet, recorded instead under technical incident. In the following weeks, the sandpit remained fenced off under the claim of drainage repairs. No public statement was issued by the college, and the damaged pole disappeared from storage. It was April 14th, 2016, in Tampa, Florida. The afternoon breeze carried the smell of cut grass and pine tar. mixing with the dull thud of baseballs striking netting. It was a typical Thursday pregame practice, quiet except for the steady rhythm of the pitching machine. Ethan E.J. Mendez was 17, a senior shortstop at Jefferson High School. He was known for his quick reactions, an instinctive player who read hops before the ball even touched dirt. Coaches called him reliable, the sort who stayed late after drills to perfect footwork. His father, Carlos Mendez, had been the team's volunteer assistant since freshman year, rarely missing a session. EJ wanted a college scholarship and had been attending weekend showcases hoping for recruiter attention. The team trained at a municipal field bordered by a chain-link fence and shallow bleachers. The infield turf was dry from early season heat, and the batting cage sat just off the third base line. The pitching machine was a twin-wheel model, set to deliver fastballs at roughly 70 miles per hour. It was routine equipment, nothing unusual or faulty. EJ often stood close during rotations to watch timing, a habit he picked up to study other hitters' stances. His father had cautioned him about distance before, but EJ brushed it off as part of improving reaction time. That afternoon, the practice ran behind schedule. The varsity game was only hours away, so drills were compressed into shorter rounds. A teammate, Daniel Ruiz, was up to bat against the machine, taking sharp, low cuts into the net. EJ stood several feet to the right of the cage, helmet off, resting his bat on his shoulder. His father was adjusting the feeder on the machine, occasionally glancing up to check positions. On the sixth pitch of the rotation, the ball came off Daniel's bat earlier than expected, catching the sweet spot square. Instead of driving into the cage netting, it ricocheted straight through the narrow gap near the machine's side guard. Witnesses said the ball changed direction so fast it blurred, giving no chance to react. EJ barely turned his head before it hit him square in the chest, just left of the sternum. The impact made a short, hollow sound, more like a clap than a crack. He staggered back 2 steps, eyes wide, then crumpled onto the dirt. At first, Carlos thought his son had just had the wind knocked out of him. But when EJ didn't move, he ran onto the field. Players froze for a moment, then scattered into action. One teammate sprinted for the defibrillator by the concession stand. Another grabbed a phone and called 911. Carlos started chest compressions, counting out loud, his hands slipping against the front of EJ's jersey. The coach opened the AED, an automated defibrillator, attached the pads, and waited for the device to analyze the rhythm. It advised no shock both times, meaning the heart wasn't in a shockable state. Paramedics arrived about 6 minutes later and took over, continuing CPR all the way to St. Joseph's Hospital. After nearly 40 minutes of attempts, doctors couldn't bring him back. Doctors later concluded that the ball's impact had caused a catastrophic rupture of a coronary vessel and bruising of the heart muscle, a rare form of blunt cardiac trauma distinct from commotio cordis. The force had slammed his heart against the chest wall, tearing tissue and leading to massive internal bleeding within seconds. That's why he collapsed right away, even though there were no visible injuries or broken bones. Specialists noted that such injuries are virtually unsurvivable, even with immediate CPR and AED use. Practice sessions were suspended for several days before resuming. The infield dirt was raked smooth, chalk lines replaced, and equipment rechecked. The existing AED was relocated closer to the dugout, with new signage added for faster access. Carlos Mendez resigned from the booster club 2 weeks later. He donated EJ's gloves to the junior varsity team and stopped attending games entirely. Thanks for watching. If these stories entertained you, click here for more.